Good morning, everyone. Dr. Stillman and Jim Laird here today, and we are going to be tackling a very important topic brought about by the publication of a paper on the effects of erythritol on blood clotting. But really what we're going to be talking about is not just erythritol, but artificial sweeteners in general today. So this is a very important topic for everyone to hear, understand, learn about, because it can make an enormous difference in your health and wellness. Jim, how are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you? It's interesting.
You're looking very, very intellectual in those glasses.
I'm trying. Unfortunately, yeah, I need readers. Unfortunately, not terrible, but anything on the small screen, I need a little help. I am turning 50 years pretty soon. It's pretty wild. Before we get into this topic, I was just flipping through some YouTube shorts this weekend, and Farm Aid 1985 came up. And Farm Aid was this, they still do it. It's just like Willie Nelson and John Cougar Mellencamp. But this was from 1985, and this was John Denver and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band singing Country Road. And it was on national TV. And every artist, like the biggest artists in history, were doing this thing. And it was to raise money for the American farmer and the small family farm. And there was American flags everywhere. It was on national TV. They used to do these telethons. I was 10 years old when this happened. And they used to do these telethons where they'd raise money for different charities. Bands would come and play. And just I was shocked at how different. Like, if that was put on TV today, they would probably ban it. Because it was just so family positive and just so wholesome. Roy Orbison sang Pretty Woman. The crowd went crazy. It was Van Halen was there. It was crazy. B.B. King was playing. I was like, this is we're living in a totally different planet than we were back then. And that wasn't that long ago. So there you go. I was just shocked by that. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just that it's just an observation that this is like the world we're living in right now is crazy. That's all I'm saying. And so that was just an observation. You asked me how I was doing.
About Ozempic, which we did a live on last week. If you didn't catch it, you'd better tune in. It's important information. And this is really along the same.
Yeah. And I actually would just listen to a podcast by Peter Attia and an environmental health expert or something in obesity research. And they were like, something has changed in our environment. We're not really sure why. We think maybe air conditioning is contributing to it. And I was just like, I was beating my head against the wall. I was just like, oh my gosh. They went around. They're like, well, they contribute. Like, their idea of a different environment is fast food restaurants. And I'm just like, there's a reason why people can't stop eating. Right.
Yeah.
And they just totally ignored it 100%. It was really interesting.
But the reality is that the people who are making a fortune off of people being sick cannot afford to have pundits and talking heads who have a big reach tell the truth. So they make sure they engineer the success of a lot of top podcasters and pundits and experts. And that's why
they told them
support us at stillmanwellness.com. Help us create more content for you to help you, serve you, and show you what's really going on, and also put all this fear porn, clickbait stuff like erythritol causes blood clots in a proper context. Because one of the things we really don't like about the health and wellness space is how fear-based it is and can be. And we see a lot of that fear being generated, like bioidentical hormones are a great example of this. So many people fearmonger about them. And they're wrong because they have a place, they have a role, they're a tool. And we're going to talk about that in the context of erythritol and blood clots here in a moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's crazy how much fear porn is being used today in social media to get attention.
Right.
And it's frustrating. And if you don't have that, ability to step back and use some logic and reason, you could just be chasing shiny objects around forever. And that's one of the things we try and do is try and simplify things for people, because even the scientist on Peter Attia's thing, he's like, we have more information than ever, but most of it's useless, right? It's like useless information.
We're going to
So
talk.
we try and simplify things for people and make it practical.
And Anthony, thank you for the compliment. Anthony over on YouTube says, thank you both. Your content is awesome. So let's jump in. Erythritol, this study came out over the weekend. I sent it to Jim, said, hey, we should do a talk on this. For those of you who don't know, erythritol is a natural artificial sweetener. And let's start by the paper showed that there was increased risk of blood clots in people who consumed 30 grams of erythritol in one sitting. And it isn't actually like a true study in the sense of we followed a lot of people for 20, 30, 40 years, 10 years, 5 years, whatever. And they ate a lot of erythritol, and then the people we compared them to didn't, and they had more blood clots than those people. That's very important. They just said that this could tend to, based on our results, cause more blood clotting. And this is the kind of headline that you see all the time in health and wellness, right? You know, it could be aluminum dough conditioners or anti-humectants increase risk of blood clots. It could be, although the aluminum lobby would probably do a pretty good job of shutting that down. It could be hormones do this. It could be birth control pills do this. It could be weightlifting too often does this. It could be any number of these things. And one of the things that people completely miss when one of these papers comes out is just all the different things that go into the context of this. And the funny thing about it is I read this study and I am actually no more afraid of erythritol now than I was before I read the study. And I want to explain why. So number one, erythritol is a natural artificial sweetener. And when I say that, it's sort of tongue in cheek, right? How do you have a natural artificial sweetener? One of the things that's funny about people, particularly in our space, is people are very obsessed with being natural. And then there begs the question, what does natural mean? All the other animals in nature live a life of a local seasonal diet. They live in harmony with their environment. They starve to death when there's not enough food. They die of dehydration when there's not enough rain. They restrict themselves to a range where they are not able to, for example, they can't leave where they would live without any kind of clothing. They don't make fire. They don't cook food. They don't drill wells and pull water out of the ground, let alone oil, let alone make plastic. So what's natural and what's unnatural gets a little bit fuzzy to me. There's definitely something unusual, though, about taking whatever it is erythritol is created from. I don't actually remember off the top of my head. But whatever your
corn.
Artificial, thank you.
Corn.
Whatever your artificial sweetener of choice is, or natural artificial sweetener, so to speak, of choice is, there's nothing natural, arguably, about us accessing these sweeteners in nature. But there is a question of, okay, it's not natural, so to speak, but we can do it. How much is too much and how much is dangerous? And that's really what I think this study was trying to assess. And it's very clear to me that eating 30 grams of erythritol in one sitting is a bad idea, but I probably would have told you that before we got into this. For reference, the only artificial sweetener that I'm currently consuming on a regular basis is allulose. Allulose, I don't know a lot about, but it's like there's a couple of grams of allulose in the product that I really like called Skin Sips that I've found gives me more energy and mental clarity and resiliency, and that I'm getting a lot of positive testimonials from my patients. And this study came out, and it's not allulose, it's erythritol, but I'm no more concerned about my daily Skin Sips habit than I am about the consumption of erythritol in, say, some sugar-free chocolate chips. My first thought when I read the study design wasn't, oh no, we better get rid of all the erythritol. It was, number one, who funded this study and who funds these researchers? Because this is the kind of study that I would fund if I were the sugar industry or if I were the artificial sweetener industry. And this is important for people to know. If something like erythritol occurs in nature, in a biological organism, anything, then you can't patent it. And so there's never going to be as much money behind the erythritol lobby as there is behind the artificial sweetener lobby, because artificial sweeteners, truly artificial sweeteners, they are going to be patentable. You could patent a method for making erythritol. You could patent a method for making an artificial or a natural sweetener of any kind. But generally speaking, people can also then reverse engineer those processes, and then they can undercut you in the market. And that means that the artificial sweeteners are always going to have more of a vested interest behind them than the natural ones. And that's goes for hormones as well. I mean, that's part of why the pharmaceutical industry can get away with making things like conjugated equine estrogen or birth control pills or Premarin or Prempro, which we know are associated with increased risks of things like blood clots and cancers, but that no one does anything about. They do it and it's legal. If a doctor prescribes bioidentical hormones, then people will say, oh, well, he is, causing people to have cancer, even though that's not true based on the literature. So the same thing happens in the artificial sweetener market. So number one, who's funding the studies and who's funding these labs that are publishing these studies? And number two, who eats 30 grams of erythritol in one sitting? This is an absolutely insane dose. My wife consumes skin sips as well, and she complains that if she dilutes the skin sips in the amount of water that they suggest, which is like 8 ounces, it's too sweet. She dilutes it in something like 32 ounces. And I agree with her. I think it's too sweet without being cut by a little bit more water. And why is that important? Well, if you're going to do a study on 30 grams and the average person is only eating 1 or 2, that's not really that helpful. And it really cuts to a deeper issue, which is why are people needing, wanting, or even potentially consuming 30 grams of an artificial sweetener at one sitting or even in a single day? Something is very, very wrong with the American and the human palate and mind and body, that people are feeling this overwhelming need for these unbelievable quantities of sweeteners, whether that's sugar, artificial sweeteners, natural sweeteners, whatever you want to, however you want to cut it. This is very abnormal. And people, we need to talk about this because it's not healthy for people to have such sweet tooths. And it's part and parcel of people, frankly, getting sicker and less resilient and more toxic with all the different hazards of our modern world. So, Jim, what are your thoughts on that with 25 years of training people and helping them lose weight, regulate their appetite, and make better eating choices?
Well, everything comes down to the dose, right? And of course, they've done studies where they've compared soda to, artificial sweeteners. And it does help, when people use artificial sweeteners, it does help people lose weight. But, once again, the truth is always in the dose. Like, what is you take too much water, you die. Too much oxygen, you die. So, and they don't tell you in these studies that they're observational and that they're observational and in vitro. So they don't tell you those as well. And any kind of correlation they find, they automatically run to causation without telling you that, right? Without giving you the overall view. I think in the big thing, like I was talking about with that Peter Attia thing, why are people so sick that they have to medicate themselves with food? It might be the fact that we've designed a world where the majority of people are spending 98% of their time indoors and they feel like garbage, right? Why are children morbidly obese? Oh, it might be the fact that they're spending 98% of their time indoors and they're having to medicate themselves. They're craving sweets. I'm trying to watch the comments on, you've got a lot of people on Instagram watching. Joni says she loves the boat illustration in the background. I explained to her that that's actually a model. But let's see here if we got any good questions. They're asking about stevia. Yeah. And the one guy comments, Lucas, they aren't saying it's bad or good. They're saying the study was well, he's commenting on us. So the study is stupid because nobody consumes that much artificial sweetener. But that's basically it. Like, everything is a tool, like I said. And if you add a little stevia to your coffee, if you add a little, this stuff is in one of your supplements, I don't think you're gonna get in trouble if you're metabolically healthy, right? But the funny thing
Right.
is that they had some studies that show it does increase blood volume, but then again, on what level of, and this stuff is found in trace amounts in fruits and different foods, so that's why they deem it as natural. But if you're a
Yeah.
healthy human and you have a healthy metabolic system, you're going to be able to handle most things that are thrown at you. It's just most of the foods are that people are eating today are highly
Yeah.
processed and have a ton of garbage.
Denise asks an interesting question. She says, can anyone describe the approximate volume of 30 grams? So 30 grams, if you've ever taken a gram of anything, vitamin C, turmeric, phosphatidylcholine, I mean, a gram capsule is probably about this big. Most people describe a gram capsule or gram tablet as a horse pill. Most supplements you'll find are 500 milligram capsules or tablets or less. And so if you're looking at 30 grams of a product, imagine 30 of these. That's a lot. It's an enormous amount of a product. And that's part of why, I mean, I get nauseous thinking about eating 30 grams of erythritol because I know how sweet it is. I think, I mean, I don't, but at the same time, and let's talk about, somebody asked too in the comments, is it good or is it bad? The reality is that small quantities of these things, I really am not going to worry about. Small quantities every day is also different from small quantities every once in a while. I'm only taking in, 1 or 2 grams of allulose with my skin sips every day. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about it as a daily habit. I'm also not in a state of ill health. When people come to us who are sick, they're trying to recover from a serious illness. They've got heart issues, they've got neurological issues, they've got issues with severe brain fog, inability to focus, they've got serious GI issues, they've got issues with, say, their microbiome. I'm much more concerned with eliminating things that maybe, I call it complicating the clinical picture, because I've been surprised by what people react to. I sent this article to my friend Russell Jaffe, who is his background's in immunology. And he said to me, all artificial sweeteners derange the microbiome and they basically slow down detoxification pathways. And I don't doubt that he's wrong, but 2 grams of allulose for a 35-year-old, 36-year-old healthy man is not the same as 2 grams of allulose or erythritol or sugar or stevia or any other sweetener or artificial sweetener. It's not the same as that for someone who's, say, 35, 36, and in very poor health, can't get up off the couch, doesn't have the energy to live day-to-day life, doesn't have the energy to hold down their job or do a good job at it. So these are very different people and very different questions, right? Which is a big part of why we have so many different opportunities to get to know you if you're listening to this, because we've found that the health and wellness space is full of people who want to tell you what to do without ever finding out about who you are, what you're doing, what your goals are, what matters to you, and what your current state of health, wellness, fitness, and so on and so forth may be. This is also why before we actually work with somebody at my medical practice, we sit down and we have a 45-minute conversation about what are your goals, are they reasonable, are they realistic, and what is it going to take to get there. I had a call this morning with a gentleman who's currently active duty in the armed forces. And his question was, look, how do I get my energy back to where it needs to be for me to be who I need to be at work, for my family, etc. This is very, very common in that community because they have so many toxic exposures, because they get, his term was, they run at red line for so long. Being in the military is an exhausting, dangerous job. And so many of them wind up in this position. And this is the sort of case where, having gotten to know the person, I say, we need to eliminate all the things that could possibly be derailing your health, even slightly, because we need to figure out what combination of things we're going to do that are going to get you back on track. And it's possible, however unlikely, that a couple grams of an artificial or natural sweetener is actually a significant part of the problem. We didn't end up getting into this because it didn't come up in the conversation. But if you were to ask me about this is what I would say. And that's really important. It doesn't take Jim or I a long time to assess you and help you understand, okay, can you get away with this or not? Do you need to get rid of this or not? And that's part of why we have so many group coaching calls in Stillman Wellness and so many group coaching calls for patients at the medical practice, Stillman MD. And a big part of what's wrong with artificial sweeteners and sweeteners in general isn't just the sweetener, the carbohydrates if it's a natural sweetener, or the artificial sweeteners or artificial natural sweeteners like erythritol. It's actually what they're replacing and what they're causing you not to consume. And this is something that gets completely lost on people. So for example, one of my favorite swaps for people who are trying to improve their diet is to just tell them to swap out things like sugar or artificial sweeteners for something like molasses. Why do I like molasses? Molasses, while it has a high carbohydrate content, also has a very high mineral content and a very high vitamin content. And that actually makes it a really healthy food. And it doesn't taste the same. It's got kind of a smoky, it's very flavorful. If you've never had it, it isn't like sugar. It isn't like honey. It isn't like stevia or xylitol or erythritol or any of these other sweeteners. But it's actually a really big part of, or can be a big part of how I get people back to an optimal state of health, particularly if we're looking for a sweetener to swap out. When people are consuming artificial sweeteners, when they're consuming a lot of fat, they don't realize that it may shut down their appetite prematurely. And this actually costs them consuming more nutrient-dense foods. If you fill up on ribeye and, something sweet, you're going to be satiated very quickly. But those people, generally speaking, don't eat a lot of vegetables. They don't eat a lot of root vegetables. And this actually ends up crippling their ability to generate energy within the cell because they don't have the right mineral content. And they also don't have long-term slow release carbohydrates, which is why root vegetables are one of my favorite foods to tell people to eat. So hopefully all of that helps people understand why I don't worry about a headline like this. I will tell people to get rid of these things if we really want to make significant durable progress in a short period of time. And we're trying to maximize the return, so to speak, on every single thing that goes in their mouth, everything that's part of their daily routine. But for people who are otherwise healthy, doing well, feeling good, it's not that big of a deal. So Barb asks, hello, Barb, good to see you here. I use 2/3 of a cup of erythritol in a recipe for a brownie that I make for my husband. He eats a small custard every night for his chocolate fix. Is this okay? This is a great example of the kind of question that we'll get on a group coaching call. And this is a question where we always ask more questions. Like, for example, if you're using 2/3 of a cup of erythritol in a brownie mix, well, how big is the brownie tin? Is it this big or is it this big? Because if it's this big, that's 2/3 of a cup spread out over a very big tin. If it's this big, it's 2/3 of a cup spread out over a very small tin, right? Is he eating half a brownie? One brownie. Is one brownie this big or is one brownie this big? Right? And so Jim said it, he said the dose is what really makes he didn't say quite this way, but Paracelsus said the dose makes the poison. And this is one thing where we see so much falling apart in the health and wellness info space is people are like, we got to take this and you got to do this and you got to stack it with that. And you got to then do this. And you got to do this over here. And we just say, man, like no one is adjusting this for your height, your weight, your size, your exercise level, all of it. So what I would say, Barb, as sort of a bottom line is a small serving of a brownie and a custard is going to be tolerable for most people. But I also don't know anything about your husband. And, when we get questions from wives about husbands, we've got to ask questions like, well, is the husband, is he in good health? Is he in poor health? Is he trying to make progress? What kind of progress is he trying to make? People who are trying to come back from a serious illness, sweets are generally off the menu for a period of time, with rare exceptions. And usually it has to be a very small quantity, teaspoons, tablespoons, nothing more. And Deborah asks, blackstrap or just regular? Hello, Deborah, good to see you. The answer is blackstrap molasses. That's what I use. Unsulfured blackstrap molasses. Jim, jump in. I know you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I'm glad you covered that, because it's like, what is the overall state of the person? Is the person in really good health? Then they're probably not going to have to worry about that. If you're trying to be healthy and look good and feel good, stuff like artificial foods, like foods that are processed, are going to be less than 10% of your diet. So if you have, some artificial sweeteners or some sort of things that's less than 10% of your diet, most people that have a healthy detoxification system, that are healthy overall, their stress bathtub is half empty or a quarter full. They're going to handle things like this, whether they're bad or good, fairly, without even noticing. Now, if your husband's in a really bad place, he's diabetic, he's overweight, he's highly inflamed, that might not be the greatest option. So it just depends. And we'll get people that'll be so obsessed over fructose or something minor like that isn't really a big deal, but they're not getting outside. They're not getting their sleep. Their sleep's horrible. They're not taking care of themselves. They're working too many hours at work. They've got all these other humongous, they're in a boat and there's big, their boat is sinking and there's all this water coming through into the boat, and the boat is going down, and there's some lady on the top deck that's like, there's a crack in my windshield, or a crack in my window. There's a crack in my window, and there's tons of water just pouring into the boat. And most people get obsessed. Most people get obsessed with things that probably don't matter for most people.
Yeah, we describe this. I've described this in the practice as worrying about what color the window dressing is when the house is on fire. And I would find this happening in the hospital when I was a resident. That was when I came up with this analogy. Is we would see somebody on the team would be like, oh, well, I don't know, this person maybe needs to increase this drug from 20 to 30 milligrams. And I'm looking at their list of problems and I'm thinking this person is, probably 6 months away from dying. And you're worried about a 20% change in a dose of a medication on a list of 40 meds. This is not likely to have a significant impact on their life, quality of life, outcome, etc. And it's not that you don't want to be detail oriented. It's not that you don't want to optimize. But the reality is that a lot of people are worrying about, oh no, the drapes are black. That doesn't go with the hunter green we painted this room with. It's like, your house is on fire.
Your house is on fire and you're worried about the color of the drapes.
Let's get the fire extinguisher. Let's call the fire department. Let's set up a bucket brigade. Let's worry about the color of the window dressing later.
No, we'll blame the fire on the fire department. That's what we'll do.
That is such a problem. Oh my gosh, yeah. And that's one thing that can be tough in the health and wellness space, is that sometimes people will feel worse with what's going to make them better. And it's a really interesting dance trying to help people get well in a way that doesn't derail their life. Because ultimately what people don't realize about a lot of what we do is helping people get healthy involves increasing the amount of stress that they're under, but it has to be done in a measured way. So Jim's been talking about getting outside and getting sunlight. Well, getting sunlight on your skin and in your eye is a type of stress. But what we'll often find is that people are coming in and they're exhausted. And they actually feel more tired after they've gone out and gotten sun, and they won't be able to stand, for example, the heat of the middle of the day. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't have that resiliency. And so you have to start with graded amounts of light exposure. You have to start with a couple hours outside early in the morning and then a couple hours outside late in the afternoon. And people are sometimes shocked by how this makes them feel better, function better, gives them more energy. They feel more relaxed. They sleep better at night. And they didn't have to go out and punish themselves. And just in the same way, we'll see a lot of people who are on, for example, high doses of artificial sweeteners in order to cope with the cravings that go along with, and this is one of the scenarios in which I could actually see someone getting to 30 grams of erythritol. They're maybe doing this in order to be able to sustain the energy that they're expending in something like a HIIT class. Jim always jokes with me that I need to start a hormone replacement clinic next to a high intensity workout studio, because if you want to crash your hormones, the recipe is calorie restriction and high intensity exercise. And Jim saw that over and over and over again at his gym when he was operating it in person. We see it over and over again in the medical practice. I've had people come in testimonials with me and say that 50% of their improvement in one of our programs was a conversation with Jim where he convinced them that rather than going to the gym and flogging themselves through another 45-minute HIIT workout, what they really needed to do was slow down and take a walk and relax. And they would actually gain weight and lose dress sizes when they started to implement what we were recommending to them. And if that baked your noodle for a minute, I just want to explain and unpack that. You can gain weight and become a smaller version of yourself because you're losing fat, which takes up a lot of space, and you're putting on bone and muscle, which doesn't change your frame if it's bone, and puts on muscle, which is much more dense than fat.
Yeah, it's a beautiful business model. Spinning studio, hormone replacement, right next door, right? And then you could have a wine and cheesecake store, coffee shop next to that, and then you could set up your Ozempic, peptide,
You're missing
whatever
in
the same row of shops.
You're missing a key ingredient. There has to be an espresso bar.
Right. And that goes with the cheesecake and the wine.
I don't know. I think espresso bar, HIIT workout studio, bioidentical hormone replacement clinic with peptides, and then upscale wine and pastry bistro.
Then you have to have a upscale pet store too. You got to have that in there as well, because that goes with the whole thing. And you got to have a yoga pants store. You got to have like a Lululemon or something like that.
Absolutely.
In there too. That's just a crazy. That is a money maker.
Brent's asking a very interesting question. Have you totally gone over to the other side? Smiley face. I think she's being sarcastic here. Do you use any medications, or is the emphasis on au naturel? This is a great question and one that we get all the time. So we like to say there's no rules, only tools. I was mentioning earlier that I was on a call with an active duty service member earlier this morning. And, a lot of these guys wind up in a position where they were planning on being in the service for 20 years. And all of a sudden they're at year 15 and they're not able to operate the same way that they were. And all of a sudden they're concerned about their ability to go out, do the job, and come home in one piece because they don't feel like they're keeping it together or keeping up. And that doesn't necessarily have to be something like active duty service. It can be just going through what is required of, say, like, a peacetime or a stateside rotation or active duty, whatever that may look like. Because a lot of people don't realize the military is not just about going out and blowing things up and shooting things and people and whatever. There's a lot of like logistical work. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of learning and study and, staring into computer screens. But if that guy comes to me who's got 15 years of active duty and tons of toxic exposures from multiple deployments, and say his testosterone is really, really low, his hormones are awry, then you can count on him not feeling better even if he does all of the things. He gets into the sauna, he goes outside and gets sunlight, he is wiggling his toes in the grass and earthing. He's eating an organic, local, seasonal diet with the perfect macros. He's eating organic beef that was grown or raised by a farmer he knows personally who lives down the street. I mean, we see over and over and over again people who come into the medical practice who say, I'm doing all of the things. I've listened to all the Ben Greenfield podcasts and I've read all the books, and I don't understand why I still feel so poorly. What am I missing? And frequently what we'll see is that their hormones are very much awry. Now, hormones are all prescriptions except for DHEA and pregnenolone because they're extremely harmless and they're over the counter. And I guess I'll say melatonin is also available over the counter, and it is technically a hormone.
It's vitamin D.
Vitamin D, yeah. I mean, you could even say vitamin A is a hormone, but anyway, without getting too deep into the weeds of like what's a hormone, what's a vitamin, because yeah, well now I have to digress on this because it's too interesting. The word vitamin actually comes from, it's a portmanteau of two words, vital, amine. And they created it when they were originally discovering vitamins because they thought that there was some vital amino acid in the foods that they found were nutritionally essential for people. Like, for example, thiamine was discovered as an essential B vitamin when they started to feed chickens bleached or parboiled white rice where the thiamine had been removed, and they found that the chickens basically fell apart. Quite literally, you do fall apart when you don't get enough thiamine. It's an ugly thing. And I've actually seen it in real hospitalized patients before, which has been fascinating. But the point is, people would fall apart when they didn't get these foods, and they thought they were amino acids, but in truth, they were just associated with or complex to amino acids in most cases. And Albert Szent-Györgyi, who discovered vitamin C, said, a vitamin is something that makes you sick if you don't eat it. And that's a really interesting take on this idea. Hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, you will get pretty predictable symptoms if these hormones wane to extremely low levels. What's paradoxical about it is you'll find two men, one of them has a testosterone of 200. Both of them, let's say, have testosterones of 200, which is, by the way, really, really, really low. And one of them has an enormous amount of drive, gets up every day, full of life, full of enthusiasm. You can't stop him. And the other guy is feeling like he just can't get off the couch and is totally exhausted and is maybe suicidally depressed. And there's a sort of $1 million question in the health and wellness world, the medical world, of what is it about these two men that's different, that their hormone level can be the same and they can have such a radically different experience of the world. This happens with women with testosterone, estrogen, their sex steroid hormones. So when people ask me, what do I think about bioidentical hormones? What do I think about hormone replacement? The answer is you have to get to know the patient, you have to understand the history, and you have to ask what's the goal and what are sort of the parameters within which I'm operating. And when I say operating, if you look at a lot of what's happened to active duty service members, many of them feel like the thing that they're prepared for is to go out and be in the military and be on the front line. And that's how they earn their money. If they don't work for the government, they wind up working for the agency. They wind up working for a third-party military contractor. They wind up going into, say, a mercenary force somewhere or private security or something like that. And so they feel like, well, I have to be able to operate at this high level, and I'm doing all the things I can possibly think of or know to do to be healthy, and it's not getting me where I need to be. What else can I add? And you can easily add hormones. And that can often be what I call a bridge to a better place, where you get them through the time they need doing the job that maybe not the healthiest job for them, to a place where they could, if they wanted to, reassess whether they wanted to continue hormones. Now, the reality is I rarely see people who start bioidentical hormones transitioning off of them because they get very attached to how good they feel on those hormones. Like, we have a woman in the practice who came to us for bioidentical hormones, and she calls them her happy drops, her happy pills, because they make her feel so good. So do I use medications? Yes. Do I use bioidentical hormones? Yes. I use that in conjunction with a shared decision-making process with the patient, because I like to tell my patients, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to inform you of the likely consequences of your actions based on my experience, my training, and my knowledge. Because truthfully, hormones have such a powerful effect on who you are, how you feel, how you function in the world, that to say, well, we should replace everyone whose level is X, I think really doesn't honor the fact that just because your level is X doesn't mean that you need it to be Y for you to achieve what you think is meaningful in life. So that's a really long answer to a very funny and important question. Jim, what do you think?
Well, these are all tools. If you have somebody who's chronically inflamed, needs a little help to get going in the right direction, a little metformin is going to go a long way for them. And the difference is in what we do is, if we do use, or you use, I'm not using them, but I'm part of the team. If we use an intervention, whether it's a, cortisol or whatever it is, we're also going after the lifestyle part of it. Whereas the typical, the reason why medications and that have gotten such a bad rap, whether it's painkillers or whatever else, there's no effort to actually change the lifestyle, to work on the things that are going to basically help that person improve before they run out of therapeutic runway, so to speak. You know, if somebody needs a little thyroid to help them keep going until we get the lifestyle in order, and guess what? If you up your protein, you get your exercise in order, maybe they don't need to increase the dose. Maybe they could come off, maybe they don't. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, if you use a drug to help you overcome something or an autoimmune disease to get it under control, and then you're able to get your lifestyle in order so that the autoimmune disease doesn't continue to get worse, or the drug doesn't run out of therapeutic runway. These things are designed for emergencies. And most people will just say, okay, you're type 2 diabetic. Here's metformin. 2 years later, when the metformin stops working because they haven't changed their lifestyle, if anything, they followed the recommendations of the Diabetes Association, have gotten even worse. And then they're like, well, what's next? Like, what can I do now? Oh, well, you know, maybe we can, you know, we'll give you Ozempic now or whatever else, instead of saying, hey, let's look at your lifestyle. Let's look at your sleep. Let's do all these things. So people get real freaked out. People are so afraid to take, you know, an antibiotic or a painkiller. It's just that can't be your only solution. That's the modern medicine is like the drugs are the only solution. They're a tool just like anything else. And we need to do a better job of coaching people on how to improve their lifestyle and to get themselves in a better place so they don't need to use the drugs as much.
And it's about trade-offs. So for example, if somebody comes in and their testosterone's really low and they're working a night shift job, you know, we'll have a frank conversation with them of, hey, you know, lots of people come back from where you are with a low testosterone level by normalizing their circadian rhythms and optimizing their diet and their lifestyle. And if they come back to us and they say, I'm not in a position financially, let's say, to give up my night shift job, well, then the conversation is, okay, if that's the case, then for you to continue to operate at night well and not continue to see your health decline, frankly, one of the only things that may allow you to do that is adding some kind of hormones outside of what your body's naturally producing. And that's a trade-off, right? So let's say that person then goes, because a lot of, if you run around in the world of bioidentical hormone replacement, generally speaking, most of the all-inclusive practices in the United States are offering their services all-inclusive for something like $200 to $250 per month. You are going to find places doing it for less, and those people are always shortchanging or cutting corners on the fundamentals. And a lot of the time, they're doing things that are like I saw this. I mean, I recently saw a case of a doctor who I thought would know better, who he is on a hormone replacement regimen that's like 20 or 30 years old. And I was blown away by the fact that he was on that regimen. And I even contacted him about this and said, what are you doing? You know you're on the roller coaster with this dosing regimen. It doesn't make sense to me that you're treating your body this way. Am I missing something? So you have to have these conversations, you know, like, let's say, can you handle an extra $200 a month for bioidentical hormone replacement? And again, that number varies a lot depending upon, like, that I'm thinking of bioidentical hormones for testosterone. Women's hormones actually tend to be more than that, depending on what kind of monitoring and testing you're doing. And like I said, there's lots of people out there with lots of different price points. I just tell you, I see people who are coming in lower than that. They tend to be shortchanging the value to their customers and certainly not doing the kind of diet and lifestyle coaching and counseling that I think is appropriate and indicated in those cases. But if that trade-off is not worth it to that person, right, then it makes more sense to ditch the job. So it all ends up becoming a matter of, what are you willing to trade off? And, you know, what is it going to be worth to you to add something like this as an expense? Because it also takes some time out of your schedule to deal with. But like I said, I've got many, many patients who've come back to me when we had a frank, open discussion of whether to continue these bioidentical hormones, as an example, who said, look, I love the way I feel. I do not want to go back to feeling the way that I was feeling. And, you know, it's just a matter of, I can't believe we're still talking about this with erythritol, because I didn't think we were going to go here today. But it's, hormones are what prevent people from, or keep people from, turning into little old people. And that's one of the things that the pharmaceutical industry really doesn't want out there in the public consciousness, because their gambit to make bioidentical hormone, or really their quest to make menopause and andropause conditions, aging, really a condition or a set of conditions that is treated with patentable drugs, is not working out for them. When people get on bioidentical hormones, they see the benefit and they see how many of their conventional drugs they can get off of. And they realize that they can, and that the bioidentical hormones are a much better option than most of those pharmaceutical drugs. But that is thought crime in conventional medicine, which is why most patients are on 30 meds for a bunch of problems that they really wouldn't have if they had an optimal diet and lifestyle. So
that is correct. I was answering a question from Marsha on Instagram, on your Instagram. I'm signed in under Nika Barbell, so it might be a little confusing, but she was asking about people that are budget challenged, and our Optimum Wellness membership is $1 a day, and we can teach you just about everything you need to know about how to take care of yourself, particularly if you're on a budget over there. You can get our free quick start guide, www.stillmanwellness/quick start. That will give you our quick start guide, which basically lays out the 5 biggest things we've seen that move the needle for people. And that's totally free. And that will also get you on our email list. I'm putting that link in the comments right now, which will go on YouTube, but it won't go on Instagram. But I also put that on Instagram. I was signed in with Nika Barbell. So,
and all of our memberships at Stillman Wellness come with some coaching calls every month. So we can actually get on a call with you, learn who you are, help you understand the process, and also help you understand how to get the most out of your membership. Because, one thing we hear from people is, well, I can't make the coaching calls. How can this help me? We've tried to make it as automated as possible and as simple as possible, because we know how tight time is right now for people, with all the different people and things that are vying for your attention in the current attention economy.
Yeah, the amount of information that is out there is just absolutely ridiculous. And you can get totally lost in the amount of information, particularly the fear stuff. I mean, I keep seeing over and over again, I drink a Zevia every day. Is that okay? How many grams of, please pronounce what we're talking about for me.
Erythritol.
How many grams a day is safe? People are getting obsessed with what is the right answer to that, and the answer is we don't know. We know what the fatal dose of arsenic is for most people,
right?
But it varies. It varies extremely. There's a big variable there.
But the other thing is,
instead of obsessing,
go
ahead. Instead of obsessing over how many milligrams can I get away with, but also you got to understand with these sweeteners, particularly the ones that are in energy drinks, not only are you getting the sweetener, but you're also getting a whole bunch of other stuff that throws all your vitamins and minerals out of whack, and then revs your cortisol up. Plus, you're getting the aluminum from the aluminum can, right? So if you're drinking, we get people that are drinking 4, 5, 6 monsters a day, or bangs. And one girl I knew, she was drinking 4 bangs a day. That's 60. That's 12 or 1,400 grams of caffeine a day.
That's bananas.
Plus all and she's 100 pounds. And so that's going to have, I love stimulants, and I could not drink that many bangs in a day. I'd be a complete.
And Jim's, what are you running right now, Jim?
I'm down to 2. I've lost 10 pounds in the last 3 weeks. So I'm down to 255. My goal is to get down to I want to run about 230.
Yeah.
So we're on the way down.
And for those
the funny thing is the funny thing is the more weight I lose, the bigger I look. Because the leaner I get, the bigger I look. It's really funny.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that, everyone who asks us questions, because we get a lot of questions like, how much of this, how much of that, how much is too much of this, how much is too much of that. The real question all of you are looking to answer is, how do I achieve my goals? And the biggest mistake we see people making in their health and wellness journey is they never actually define their goal. They hop from one topic to another, to another, to another. They chase down one rabbit hole after another, and they eventually get exhausted without even ever realizing that the reason they're exhausted is they have not defined a goal and they do not have a system or a process by which to identify the goal and then create a plan to achieve it. And so just like clockwork, every year I get a certain number of people who've contacted me in the past for help. We did not work together, or we worked together for less time than I wanted. And they come back and they say, I'm right where either we left off or I'm right where I was when I first contacted you. And that's why we love coaching people. We have a system. We know how to get people where they want to be. We know what's realistic. We know what's possible. We can walk you through all the tips, all the tricks, all the gizmos, all the gadgets, all the biohacks, all the lifestyle changes, all the different diets. But the number one question that needs to be answered isn't how much erythritol can I get away with? Should I try bioidentical hormones or not? Are they safe? Are they dangerous? Are they this? Are they that? Am I too fat? Am I too thin? Am I too tall? Am I too slow? Am I too weak? Am I too dumb? Am I too this? Am I too that? It's where do you want to go? And what does it look like in as much detail as possible? Because saying things like, one of the best ways to not succeed is to not clearly define your goal. If you say, I want to lose weight, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? I want to, be more vital and vibrant and energetic and enthusiastic. What does that mean? What does that look like? Believe it or not, you have to be able to articulate in some kind of quantifiable way what the goal is if you're actually going to achieve it. And it doesn't have to be, well, I want to have a, lab test number that's this number. It can be subjective things, but it has to be quantified in some way. And so helping you understand these goals is the thing that we love doing on these coaching calls, which are built into our memberships at Stillman Wellness and that you get if you become a patient at my medical practice at stillmanmd.com. So Jim, I think
we have an interesting, real quick. We have an interesting comment on Instagram. Of course, the question we can't answer in this very short period of time is, I've been in bioidentical hormones for 2 years. Is it possible to get rid of the hormones via good group nutrition? The quick answer to that is yes, anything's possible, but highly unlikely. You're probably not going to feel as good. Once people get on bioidenticals, most people are going to stay on them. And then he makes a good point about plastic bottles. He talks about aluminum cans have a liner that protect that aluminum from being leached into the liquid. I thought you might want to comment on what you've seen with your hair tissue mineral analysis about, the aluminum levels that you're seeing in people that are monster addicts and drinking a lot of aluminum cans.
So it's what the aluminum industry wants people to believe is that because they have this kind of liner, I mean, first of all, what's in the liner and why do I think that's safe? But secondly, that liner definitely degrades. And, Christopher Exley, the world expert on aluminum research, has written about this extensively in his book, Imagine That You Are an Aluminum Atom, which I encourage people to read, because aluminum is one of the biggest problems that we see. And we will see people regularly who are consuming a lot of energy drinks, or who are not just energy drinks, but anything that's in a carbonated aluminum can, we will see that they have much higher aluminum levels in their hair. And this correlates with a lot of their issues that then clear up when we sort out the aluminum exposure. So it's a terrible myth that the aluminum industry has peddled on people that aluminum is safe, and that aluminum is not getting into their foods and beverages in the packaging that they're eating out of or drinking out of, because that's just wrong. And Chris Exley has proven that in spades. So I hope this was helpful for everyone. We look forward to seeing you all every Monday, 10 a.m. What's our topic next week, Jim?
It's on YouTube. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but most importantly, our topic for
5 essentials you need right now.
Right. But most importantly, what's our topic on Thursday? I believe you can get on the email list for that.
Thursday is Unlock Your Potential, the secret to unstoppable success. We're going to be talking about all our favorite tricks for this.
Yes. So get on the email list. You can go to Stillman stillmanwellness.com. Go to the bottom of the page. You can go to Stillman Wellness /Quick Start to get on the list as well. And of course, we would love your support. You can support us by going to stillmanwellness.com and signing up for the membership. It's only $1 a day.
That's right. And we will show you what really works. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Have yourself a great day. Make sure you get outside.